Razorclaw, the Lion, the King, the commander of the most feared combiner unit in G1 history. Razorclaw was the field leader of the Predacons, a 5-man Decepticon hit squad who answered only to Megatron and operated as elite hunters. His beast mode was a mechanical lion, and unlike a lot of Decepticons who were basically angry robots with weapons bolted on, Razorclaw actually had a tactical mind. He studied his targets before striking. He mapped the environment. He identified weaknesses before the first shot was fired. That restraint made him uniquely dangerous in a faction full of bruisers who just charged at everything and hoped the math worked out. His weapon was a laser rifle that could shatter a mountain, and his personality was cold and methodical. Not flashy, not theatrical, just patient. And in war, patience usually beats aggression. Razorclaw understood one thing more deeply than any Decepticon around him. Every target has a weakness. You just have to be disciplined enough to find it before you commit. Dive bomb. If Razorclaw was the brain, dive bomb was the aerial advantage. His beast mode was a mechanical eagle, and that gave him something most Decepticons didn't have: complete dominance of the sky. He could spot targets from elevation, close distance at speeds that made evasion nearly impossible, and his electromagnetic null ray could disable vehicle circuitry while he was still in a dive. But what makes Dive Bomb interesting beyond the raw capability is the rivalry. Before joining the Predacons, Dive Bomb crossed paths with Swoop of the Dinobots and stripped him of his bird mode identity. Just took it, claimed the aerial predator archetype for himself, and dared anyone to argue about it. Swoop never forgot that. Every time the Dinobots and Predacons crossed paths after that, there was a personal score underneath the faction conflict that made the violence hit differently. Dive Bomb wasn't just fighting for Megatron. He was protecting a stolen identity from the one Autobot who had every right to want it back. Headstrong, exactly what his name implies. A mechanical rhinoceros with an ego the size of Cybertron and the tactical flexibility of a parking meter. He was the most stubborn Predacon by a significant margin, which is saying something when the team includes a bull and a tiger. His beast mode gave him raw physical force, and he used that as an excuse never to think more than 2 steps ahead. The irony is that Headstrong frequently argued with Razorclaw's plans not because he had better ideas, but because he fundamentally believed charging was always the right answer, every single time. And yet the team kept winning, which is less a credit to Headstrong's instincts and more credit to Razorclaw carrying the entire tactical weight for the unit. In the combined Predaking form, Headstrong becomes the right leg. That's the most fitting metaphor possible. He's load-bearing, he's essential, and he is completely incapable of independent thought. Tantrum, the bull. And before you ask, yes, he throws them constantly. Tantrum was the Predacon with the worst emotional regulation on a team that was not exactly known for emotional stability. His beast mode was a mechanical bull, and his robot mode came with electro-laser cannons that made him genuinely dangerous in a firefight. The problem was that Tantrum's combat effectiveness dropped the moment anything deviated from the plan, which was often because war rarely goes according to plan. He would fly into rages over minor setbacks, attacking allies, destroying equipment, becoming a liability at exactly the moment the team needed everyone functional. What the show did do right with Tantrum, though, was give him a genuine friendship with Dive Bomb. Two of the most volatile Predacons found something in each other that made the chaos slightly more bearable. Even among monsters, there are bonds. Even among war criminals, there is loyalty. Tantrum proves that those things and emotional regulation are completely separate. Rampage, not the Beast Wars one. We'll get there. This Rampage is the Tiger, a mechanical Siberian tiger who served as one of the Predacon team's primary enforcers in G1. His beast mode was built for speed and ambush, not sustained firefighting. Rampage could close distance faster than most targets processed what was happening, and by the time defenses activated, he was already inside their range. His fury circuits ran hot constantly, which meant he was always on the edge of uncontrolled aggression, which Razorclaw managed by giving him targets rather than orders. Point Rampage at a problem, and the problem stopped existing. The finesse was Razorclaw's job. Rampage just handled the execution, and in a 5-man unit, having that division of labor function cleanly is exactly what makes a team dangerous. Predaking, and here's where all 5 of those individually terrifying robots become something genuinely staggering. Predaking is the combined form of all 5 Predacons, and he may be the most effective combiner in G1 Transformers history. That's not a small claim in a franchise absolutely stuffed with combiners. But Predaking had something most of them completely lack: coherence. The combat icons argue. The stunt icons are barely functional as a unit. Predaking operates like a single organism because Razorclaw's tactical intelligence carries over into the combined form, giving the whole thing a level of battlefield awareness that other combiners sacrifice the moment they merge. In raw power terms, Predaking could go toe-to-toe with Omega Supreme and come out of it. In the comics, he was dominant enough that Autobots genuinely feared encountering him without a specific plan, because improvising against Predaking was basically a death sentence. Dinobot. Every faction has the soldier who's too good for it. Dinobot was that soldier for the the Predacons, and he knew it from the beginning. His beast mode was a Velociraptor, which already made him one of the stronger designs in Beast Wars history. But what made Dinobot unforgettable wasn't the beast mode or the spinning-bladed disc weapon he fought with. It was the honor code. This was a Predacon who genuinely believed in a warrior's code of conduct, which put him in direct and constant conflict with Megatron's willingness to win by any means available. So Dinobot challenged Megatron for leadership in the first episode, lost, and rather than accept secondary status on a team he'd already decided didn't deserve him, he walked over to the Maximal camp and asked to join. And Optimus Primal said yes. Just like that, Dinobot spent the rest of the series fighting alongside the Maximals, while never quite becoming one of them. Megatron. Beast Wars Megatron is one of the best villain characters in the entire Transformers franchise, and it's not particularly close. He named himself after the original Megatron as a deliberate act of provocation, a Predacon criminal who stole a golden disc containing historical information about Earth and used it to drag his crew through a transwar portal to prehistoric Earth before anyone could stop him. His beast mode started as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, became a Transmetal T-Rex, and eventually evolved into a dragon, with each form escalating the scale of his ambition. What made this Megatron different from most fictional villains was how often he was actually right. He outthought the Maximals on a weekly basis, built long-term plans that played out across entire seasons, and frequently won through intelligence rather than force. Scorponok, Megatron's loyal right hand and the Predacon who most embodied uncomplicated, dedicated service. Scorponok's beast mode was a scorpion, which gave him the ability to burrow underground, a capability that turned out to be genuinely useful for ambushes and tactical retreats. He was not the smartest Predacon on the team. He wasn't the most creative. He had no side agenda. What Scorponok had that almost nobody else on that roster possessed was genuine, uncomplicated loyalty. When Megatron said go, Scorponok was already moving. When Megatron needed covering fire, Scorponok was already providing it. He didn't scheme. He didn't plan for what happens when Megatron loses. He just followed orders with a consistency that the rest of the deeply dysfunctional Predacon crew never came close to matching. That loyalty cost him everything in the end. He died intercepting a missile meant for Megatron. Not because he was ordered to, because that's who he was. Terrorsaur. Ambition without the capability to back it up is the fastest path to becoming a running joke, and Terrorsaur sprinted down that path from episode 1. His beast mode was a Terrorsaur, which gave him genuine flight speed and aerial attack capability. On the ground he was basically useless, which might explain why he spent so much time in beast mode and so much mental energy fantasizing about overthrowing Megatron. He tried to take leadership of the Predacons multiple times across 2 seasons. He never came remotely close. The closest he got was a brief period where he absorbed a massive energon surge and gained a temporary power boost, and even then, the moment the energy ran out, he was right back to being the guy nobody took seriously. Waspinator, the galaxy's most abused robot. Waspinator is the comedic heart of Beast Wars, and simultaneously one of its most quietly sympathetic characters. His beast mode was a wasp, which gave him flight and a stinger, but what it mostly gave him was a body that could be destroyed and reassembled repeatedly without explanation, which the show ran with as an ongoing bit from the very first episode. Waspinator got blasted, exploded, ripped apart, crushed, and disintegrated with a frequency that should have constituted a war crime. He would be annihilated in Act 1 and fully repaired by Act 2 with zero acknowledgement, because the show understood that Waspinator's function was to suffer and the audience loved him for it. What makes it work beyond the slapstick is the genuine pathos underneath. In a late season episode, Waspinator just stops and asks why the universe hates him, why he always gets blown up, why nobody respects him, and there's no punchline. Tarantulas, the Predacon who was never really a Predacon. Tarantulas operated alongside the Predacon faction from the start, but something never added up. His beast mode was a tarantula. He was sinister and creeping where the others were loud and aggressive. His scientific experiments went places that no legitimate Predacon mission required. The reveal of his actual allegiance is one of Beast Wars' better long-game payoffs. Tarantulas was a Tripredicus agent, connected to a Predacon governing council that considered Megatron a rogue element just as dangerous to their interests as the Maximals were. He wasn't loyal to Megatron. He was loyal to himself and to a deeper conspiracy that wanted both factions brought to heel. His experiments fed into plans that had nothing to do with Megatron winning and everything to do with tarantulas surviving regardless of who did. Blackarachnia, the Predacon who went Maximal not because she developed a conscience, but because she was smart enough to know when her side was losing. Blackarachnia's beast mode was a black widow spider, and she leaned into every implication of that. She was manipulative, opportunistic, and easily the most tactically sophisticated Predacon after Megatron himself. She survived the entire series by being willing to switch allegiance the moment her survival required it, and more importantly, she was capable enough to make that switch actually work. The Maximals trusted her slightly because she'd proven useful. The Predacons mostly feared her because she'd proven dangerous. Her dynamic with Silverbolt, the Maximal fuser with the Wolf and Eagle beast mode and the absolutely unbearable chivalry, is one of Beast War's more genuinely interesting character pairings because Blackarachnia didn't want to be saved and Silverbolt couldn't stop trying. She ended the series as a Maximal but never lost the core of what made her a Predacon. She just redirected it toward better outcomes. Inferno, completely unhinged. Inferno's beast mode was a fire ant, and the Predacon who emerged from that stasis pod had one overriding directive above all others: serve the colony. The problem was that Inferno translated colony as Megatron's Predacon faction, and then translated Megatron as the queen of that colony, and from that point forward he became the most fanatically loyal soldier the Predacons ever had. Not because of programming adjustments, not because of orders, because he genuinely believed it with the uncomplicated certainty of an insect that has never questioned anything in its life. Inferno called Megatron his queen out loud, in front of everyone, repeatedly. He launched himself into suicidal charges because the colony required it. Quickstrike, the fuser with the least patience and the most enthusiasm for violence. Quickstrike was a combination of Cobra and Scorpion, which tells you everything about his threat level and his general approach to problems. He arrived in Season 2 as a new Predacon, and he filled a role the team genuinely needed: a fighter who would attack anything, anywhere, at any time, for almost no reason. Quickstrike wasn't complicated. He liked fighting. He was good at fighting. Megatron pointed him at problems, and Quickstrike handled them the way a hammer handles a nail. His one moment of significant plot relevance came when Megatron's early Viacon experiments briefly transformed him into a drone, a preview of what was coming for the faction in the next series. Ravage, the G1 Decepticon cassette who showed up in Beast Wars as a sleeper agent and reminded everyone what a professional looked like. Ravage had been dormant since the original Cybertronian War, reactivated by the Tripredicus Council, and sent to prehistoric Earth to assess the situation and bring Megatron in. His beast mode was still the mechanical Jaguar from G1, and he initially presented himself to the Maximals as an ally while quietly gathering intelligence. The moment he had enough data, he dropped the pretense and revealed himself as a council operative with an actual mission. For approximately 2 episodes, Ravage was the most competent entity on the entire planet. Then Megatron outmaneuvered him, converted him, and sent him to his death. The character was a direct line back to the original series, Dinobot II. If the original Dinobot represented honor, the clone represented what happens when you try to copy everything except that. Megatron created Dinobot II from recovered protoform material combined with a fragment of Rampage's immortal spark, producing a Predacon with the original's physical capability and none of his moral complications. Or so the plan went. Even in the clone, the fundamental nature kept surfacing: small hesitations, unexpected restraints, moments where the copy behaved more like the original than the programming should have allowed. The show never over-explained this. It just let the audience sit with the uncomfortable question of what exactly a spark carries, and whether it can be fully overwritten. Transmetal Megatron. After the quantum surge hit, Megatron came back upgraded, and the change was significant. The transmetal form added a hoverjet configuration to his T-Rex mode, chrome plating across the frame, and a notable bump in raw firepower. More importantly, it marked the shift in Megatron's thinking from winning the current conflict to questioning whether the rules of the conflict itself could be changed. The quantum surge was the dividing line between the schemer of Season 1 and the something genuinely alarming of Season 3, and the transmetal body was the physical symbol of that transition. This was the form Megatron was wearing when he started treating the original Megatron's spark not as a historical artifact but as a key. Galvatron, not the G11. Beast Wars II. Galvatron was a Japanese exclusive character who served as the Predacon commander in the Beast Wars II anime, and his beast mode was a lion. A massive, commanding lion named after the most iconic Decepticon commander in franchise history, which set a very specific expectation for his demeanor. He delivered on it. Beast Wars II ran as a separate conflict on a different planet during the same general timeline as the original Beast Wars, and Galvatron filled the villain role with the aggression and scale of authority the name implied. He's less examined in Western fandom only because Beast Wars II was never localized for English-speaking audiences, but within the Japanese continuity he was a genuine force who treated every situation as something to be dominated rather than negotiated. Megastorm, Galvatron's younger brother in Beast Wars II, which set up a dynamic the show ran with for its entire runtime. Megastorm was powerful, ambitious, and deeply frustrated by existing in his older brother's shadow, which is a combination that produces a very specific flavor of misery. His beast modes included a tank and later a jet, and the upgrade to Gigastorm gave him a power level that finally matched the self-image he'd been carrying since the beginning. But the core problem never went away. You can change the body. You can't change the family dynamic. Megastorm spent the series cycling between proving himself and failing to, with the gap between those two outcomes being much narrower than he would ever admit to anyone, including himself. Magmatron, Beast Wars Neo Predacon commander, and one of the most visually ambitious designs in the entire toy line. Magmatron didn't have a single beast mode. He had 3 simultaneously. His form could split into a Seismosaurus, an Elasmosaurus, and a Quetzalcoatl Quetzalcoatlus, three of the largest prehistoric creatures across land, sea, and air, and combine into a single enormous commander. The implication was obvious, and the execution delivered on it. Magmatron was designed to project authority through sheer scale, and he succeeded. Beast Wars Neo was a Japanese sequel anime following a new Predacon crew pursuing the maximal big convoy across space. Magmatron served as the threat that made every episode feel like the stakes were real. His multi-beast configuration was a design achievement that no other Transformer before or since has really matched. Guiledart, Magmatron's second in command in Beast Wars Neo. His beast mode was a Triceratops, which gave him physical armor, charging capability, and horns that functioned as weapons in robot mode. Guiledart was the strategist of the crew in the same way Scorponok had served the original Beast Wars Megatron, translating the commander's directives into actual workable plans. His name told you what you needed to know about his approach. Guile, a Predacon who thought before striking, which made him more dangerous than every member of the team who just charged. Saberback, the Beast Wars Neo Predacon with a Dimetrodon beast mode, a prehistoric creature that predated the age of dinosaurs with a distinctive sail structure running along its back. Saberback's robot mode incorporated that sail as both a weapon and a shield component, which gave him a visual design that stood apart from the more conventional animal modes across the team. He was built for close combat, specifically for getting inside an opponent's defensive range before they could bring distance weapons to bear, which required a particular combination of speed and durability that the Dimetrodon aesthetic captured in a way that a conventional dinosaur simply wouldn't have. Break, the Predacon with an Emperor Penguin beast mode. And yes, that is a sentence that exists in Transformers canon. Break's beast mode was a penguin, which sounds like the least threatening thing available on a team full of prehistoric monsters, and the show leaned into that gap between appearance and capability as an ongoing source of tension. Break's attacks were cold-based, leveraging the Antarctic aesthetic into actual combat utility that no other Predacon could replicate. He was proof that Magmatron deliberately built a team with diverse capabilities, rather than just collecting the biggest creatures available. Diverse capability is how you win the wars that brute force teams lose. Dead End, the Plesiosaur Predacon in Beast Wars Neo, built specifically for aquatic operations that the rest of the crew couldn't cover. His beast mode gave him ocean mobility that no other team member possessed, which meant any engagement near water shifted decisively toward the Predacon side as long as Dead End was operational. His name carried the pessimism common to the character type, the soldier who has survived enough losing battles to stop believing any particular fight matters. The utility was real. The existential dread was also real. He kept showing up anyway, which is maybe the most honest depiction of military service the franchise has offered. Elephorca, the name told you exactly what this was, a combination of elephant and orca, which should not work and somehow completely did. Elephorca was one of the more visually striking Predacons in Beast Wars Neo precisely because the combination occupied a design space nothing else in the franchise had ever touched. An elephant fused with a killer whale required the audience to hold two completely contradictory ideas simultaneously, and the resulting combat capability reflected both animals: raw crushing power from the elephant component, hunting intelligence, and pack strategy from the orca component. In a show with unusual beast modes, Elephorca stood out from the rest of the unusual. Sling, the Styracosaurus Predacon from Beast Wars Neo, another horned dinosaur built around aggressive forward pressure rather than tactical flexibility. Where Guiledart's Triceratops had a slightly more defensive profile, Sling pushed the assault angle harder, all forward momentum and spike-based weapon configurations. He was the Predacon equivalent of a linebacker, the one you deploy when you need something to stop moving. Tankor, what Megatron did with the Maximals he captured on Cybertron was convert their sparks into Viacon generals, soldiers with the original memories but complete loyalty to the new order. Tankor was the first of the original three generals, a massive tank mode Viacon who was eventually revealed to contain the spark of Rhinox, the gentle, brilliant Maximal scientist from Beast Wars. This set up one of Beast Machine's central tragedies. Rhinox's spark had been corrupted and reprogrammed so thoroughly that when the Maximals discovered who was inside the tank, the hope of restoration was immediately complicated. The reprogramming hadn't just changed his allegiance. It had directed his intelligence toward Megatron's goals specifically. The Rhinox who chose to fight for organic life was gone, and what remained was a strategic genius running calculations for a machine god. Jetstorm, the second of the original three Viacon generals, an aerial unit with a jet mode, fast and lethal and precisely the opposite of warm. Jetstorm was eventually revealed to contain Silverbolt's spark, which hit Beast Wars fans hard. Silverbolt had been the most chivalric, most uncomplicatedly noble Maximal in the previous series. Jetstorm was sleek and cold, and had a habit of mocking the Maximals in ways that felt designed to cause maximum damage. Blackarachnia spent a significant portion of Beast Machines trying to reach whatever remained of Silverbolt inside Jetstorm, and the show handled the dynamic with more genuine emotional weight than most Transformer series attempt. Thrust, the third original Viacon general, a motorcycle mode soldier, and the one whose identity reveal landed the strangest. Thrust was eventually revealed to contain Waspinator's spark, spark, which means the galaxy's most abused robot, the one who spent 2 seasons getting exploded and wanting nothing more than peace, was reborn as a weapon in a totalitarian army. There's something genuinely grim about that, given that everything Waspinator had wanted in Beast Wars was a life free from constant violence. The show didn't dwell on this as long as it probably could have, but the implications sat there regardless. Sometimes the universe's cruelest joke is giving someone exactly what they feared instead of what they wanted. Obsidian, one of the Viacon generals introduced in the second half of Beast Machines, and unlike the original 3, Obsidian wasn't a converted Maximal. He was a legendary Cybertronian warrior from long before the Beast Wars who had been deactivated and was reactivated by Megatron to serve as a military commander with genuine centuries of experience. His helicopter beast mode gave him aerial capability, and his history meant he came without the vulnerability that made the other generals potential liabilities. Obsidian wasn't fighting a buried memory of who he used to be. He was exactly who he'd always been, just now serving a different master. Striker, Obsidian's partner and the ground-based counterpart to his aerial operations. Another legendary Cybertronian warrior reactivated by Megatron, with a tank configuration and a combat record that matched Obsidian's own. Together, they were the most functionally competent military unit Megatron had in Beast Machines. Where the original 3 generals had the weakness of converted Maximals who might break under the right pressure, Obsidian and Striker had no such vulnerability. They were committed soldiers with centuries of experience and 0 conflicting loyalties, and their arrival significantly raised the ceiling on what the Predacon side could actually accomplish. Noble and Savage, the two-sided anomaly that Beast Machines dropped into the roster as a wild card. Noble appeared to be a feral wolf creature with no clear Cybertronian allegiance, seemingly organic, seemingly free. Savage was the dragon that Noble transformed into, monstrous and destructive. The twist, that both modes were the same entity containing Megatron's own spark in an experimental organic body, was the kind of plot development Beast Machines love. It tied Megatron's anti-organic ideology directly to his own physical existence in a way that produced genuine dramatic irony. The villain who dedicated himself to purging organics from the universe found himself trapped in an organic form, and the part of himself that experienced that form began to enjoy it. Skylynx, introduced in the Predacons Rising film that concluded Transformers Prime, Skylynx was one of 2 Predacons resurrected by Unicron possessing Megatron's body to serve as instruments of planetary destruction. His beast mode combined avian and feline elements into a winged lion-eagle configuration that gave him both aerial and ground capability simultaneously. Where Predaking was a sovereign with a philosophy, Skylynx and Darksteel were feral, reveling in destruction without the intellectual framework that made Predaking so distinct. Skylynx operated as the more dominant of the 2 newly resurrected Predacons, faster and more assertive in driving the rampage that Unicron intended as preparation for consuming Cybertron. His loyalty to Unicron evaporated the moment Predaking arrived and offered something more meaningful to be loyal to. Darksteel, the second Predacon resurrected in Predacons Rising, and Skylynx's counterpart. His beast mode had a more angular predatory bird of prey configuration that complemented Skylynx's aesthetic without duplicating it. Together they operated as a matched pair, which gave them a combat dynamic that individual Predacons lacked. Where Predaking was a singular force, Skylynx and Darksteel covered each other, created crossfire situations, and moved in ways that reflected 2 predators who had learned to hunt together rather than in parallel. Their allegiance to Unicron was shallow from the start, a temporary convenience for creatures who measured loyalty in terms of who was worth following rather than who had brought them back. Predacus, the combined form of the 3 Tripredicus Council members from the extended Beast Wars continuity. Ramhorn, C-Clamp, and Cicadicon were the governing council of the Predacon faction back on Cybertron, and their merged form represented official Predacon military force rather than the criminal operation Megatron was running on prehistoric Earth. Predacus appeared in the toy line and supplementary fiction rather than the animated series, but as a concept he represented something Beast Wars rarely showed, the institutional side of Predacon civilization. Ramhorn, one of the 3 Tripredicus Council members and a component of Predacus. His beast mode was an insect, and he represented the Council's more aggressive military faction, the voice that pushed for direct action against both Maximals and Megatron simultaneously rather than waiting for events to resolve themselves. Ramhorn understood that 2 rogue factions running an unauthorized war on a protected primitive planet was the kind of political liability that doesn't improve with time. C-Clamp, the second Tripredicus Council member, with an aquatic crustacean beast mode and a more measured political approach than Ramhorn's open aggression. C-Clamp understood that the Predacon faction needed the appearance of institutional legitimacy to function as a governing body rather than just another criminal organization with more resources. The irony was that dispatching a covert agent while publicly claiming neutrality made the Council exactly the kind of hypocritical institution they were performing against. Cicadicon, the third Tripredicus Council member, with a flying insect beast mode and responsibility for intelligence and covert operations within the Council structure. Ravage was a Cicadicon asset, which tells you how this faction faction actually operated beneath the formal governance presentation. Publicly, a Predacon ruling body, practically a shadow organization running covert missions against anyone it found inconvenient, including the supposed criminals it claimed to be policing. Antagony, a Predacon whose presence in Beast Wars was largely limited to extended fiction and supplementary material, but notable for representing something the main roster didn't. A female Predacon commander with a direct frontline leadership approach completely different from Blackarachnia's manipulation-based style. Antagony led from the front. She fought instead of schemed. Her brief story in the comics explored what a Predacon unit looked like when run by a genuine military mentality, rather than the criminal improvisation that defined Megatron's operation, and the contrast was sharp enough to make her a memorable one-time presence. Razorbeast, a Predacon from the extended Beast Wars continuity, who was secretly operating as a maximal infiltrator. His beast mode was a Razorback boar, and his actual mission was feeding intelligence back to Leo Convoy's maximal team, while maintaining his Predacon cover. Razorbeast was the double agent of the Beast Wars setting, a character study in what it costs to exist permanently in the space between two identities. The extended comics gave that premise the room it deserved. Shokarak, the extended continuity villain whose name alone suggested he was operating on a different scale from standard Predacons. Shokarak was a future Predacon warrior who had bonded with the essence of Unicron, becoming a herald of the Chaos God and operating in the distant future of the Beast Wars timeline. His storyline in the comics involved traveling back through time to prevent the events that would eventually lead to his own creation from being undone, which put him in the unusual position of being the villain trying to preserve the timeline rather than change it. Fractal, the Predacon scientist, with a Terrorsaur beast mode and a primary function built around research and development rather than combat. Fractal represented the Predacon intellectual class, the reminder that the faction wasn't composed entirely of soldiers and criminals. Someone designed the weapons. Someone reverse-engineered captured maximal technology. Someone ran the experiments that Tarantulas was too busy with his own conspiracy to handle. Fractal was that someone, consistently undervalued by the combat specialists around him, and consistently essential to the operations those combat specialists then took full credit for. Retrax, a pillbug Predacon from the extended Beast Wars continuity, and the most defensively oriented beast mode choice in the entire franchise. The ability to curl into an armored ball that could also function as a rolling vehicle mode took a garden pest and turned it into something genuinely useful for terrain navigation, defensive retreats, and surviving situations that faster, flashier Predacons didn't walk away from. Snapper, the snapping turtle Predacon, and one of the clearest demonstrations of the Beast Wars design philosophy that any animal becomes terrifying when you give it Cybertronian engineering. A snapping turtle's defensive capability translated directly into armor plating that resisted most conventional weapons. The jaw mechanism that gave the beast mode its name became a crushing close-range attack in robot mode that could end a fight before the opponent recovered from surprise. Snapper was the Predacon deployed when you needed something to survive sustained fire long enough to close distance. Not glamorous work. Absolutely necessary work. Spitter, the poison dart frog Predacon, because Beast Wars had no limits on which animals counted as predators given sufficient engineering. Spitter's combat capability relied on toxic compounds rather than physical force, a chemical warfare approach genuinely unusual among Predacons who almost universally defaulted to direct violence. A Predacon who could apply poison at range without requiring precision aim occupied a tactical niche that pure aggression could never fill, which made Spitter more valuable to mixed approach operations than his size and appearance suggested. Iguanus, a Predacon from the early Beast Wars continuity with a frilled lizard beast mode. The frill that this animal displays in threat postures translated in robot mode into an intimidation-based combat opener designed to disorient targets before the actual attack landed. Iguanus represented the first wave of Predacon ground forces in the extended fiction, the soldiers who established the baseline threat level before the more distinctive members of the faction arrived. He didn't last long enough in the animated series to develop fully, but the extended comics gave him more space as a character who understood the value of fear as a weapon deployed before any physical one. Sky Shadow, a Predacon from the extended Beast Wars continuity with a combined bat and jet aesthetic that gave him a visual design language unlike any of the main animated cast. Sky Shadow operated as an infiltrator and assassin rather than a standard combatant, using the bat's silent flight capability fused with Cybertronian stealth technology to approach targets without triggering defensive systems. He represented something the Predacon faction often obscured with its aggression, the capacity for surgical precision when the mission required it. Manticore, a praying mantis Predacon from the extended Beast Wars continuity, with cutting weapon-based attacks built around the mantis strike pattern. Manticore appeared across various comics and supplementary material, representing the wider Predacon military force that existed beyond the handful of individuals prominent in the animated series. Every faction in every war has soldiers who never appear in the main history. Manticore was one of those soldiers, effective in the field and invisible in the record. If you want to watch similar content in the future, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next video.